How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a strength coach and founder of the Apex Strength Society. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Sean McInroy. How are you doing?
Oh, mate, I'm very well. That's quite the introduction.
Yeah,
You're a good man.
Yeah, I'm hoping I get scouted to be a commentator. If I never not make it as a coach, I think I could be an announcer on WWE or something like that.
Mate, I might hire you to just like hang around with me and like say that before I enter every room. I don't know if that's something you're interested in, but
hey, if it means I'm over in Australia, I'll do that just before every session. Right, ladies and gentlemen, how are you? What have you been up to? What's been happening in your world recently?
Oh, mate, here, look, I can't complain. I work from home. My gym setup since COVID in March of 2020 has been at home. I was at a commercial gym running my business as a strength coach out of there up until that time. They closed down, obviously. I think it's a well fucking did. And I was in a fortunate enough situation where I was living and still am only a few blocks from that gym. So and I had a garage in which was convertible into, albeit small, into a training space. Being so geographically convenient for clients that were at the commercial gym, getting people to train with me at home on a one-on-one sort of secure basis was quite easy. And haven't looked back. I was in a position with my business, you can only grow so much within the confines of that sort of structure. And I was in a fortunate situation, I suppose, where I was looking for a way in which to evolve. And COVID, funnily enough, was very favorable to me from a business standpoint. And I say that, loosely, because I'm like, I know it's very bad for like a lot of people. So I'm not trying to say it was a good thing, but for me personally, that I was able to sort of take advantage of a silver lining, I suppose. But my life at the moment from a training perspective and a work perspective, especially more recently, it's the middle of summer over here in Sydney, and I live by the beach. I train people at home. I rarely wear shoes throughout the day, and life's pretty good.
Mine's pretty similar, but my feet just get a little bit colder here in
I bet. You don't want to go barefoot for too long.
I'm glad you mentioned about the silver lining of COVID and everything. And I know, it's dominated a lot of conversations about, what's happened over the last 2 years, and it has been a conversation with other coaches that I know and work with, and it sounds as though it gave people a push to adapt and change and work on things. Do you think that was the case for you? Were you always thinking about adapting and adjusting your coaching in your business, and did COVID just give you that push to be like, well, why not do it now?
Yeah, mate, 100%. I'd actually put in a deposit for a small commercial space a couple years prior. So what's that, 4 years ago now, I suppose. And it didn't work out with the landlord at the time. They weren't willing to budge on a few things, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice on my end. And so we just couldn't come to terms. I was in a comfortable and safe position where I was in the commercial gym in which I was operating. So I was like, unless it's perfect, I'm not going to make the move. And in hindsight, I wasn't ready business-wise, but I was just that keen, to get out and evolve. And so I stuck around for a couple more years, and then became a better version of myself as a coach, as a trainer. And so when COVID did hit, it was never a second thought as to where I was going to go with the business. And I never looked back. I haven't stepped foot in the place since. And it wasn't something that ever felt forced. Although obviously my hand was forced, but it was just an opportunity in which was like, all right, cool, this is the next step. I'm ready to go. The way in which I described it to a number of people, and I think I might have described it this way beforehand. Anyway, I felt like I was in the jump seat of a jet, and with my finger on that red button, like ready to go, and just waiting for that opportunity to go bang, and then to shoot my ass off and eject. But COVID pushed that button for me, and fortunately enough, I was ready to go. I had my parachute, I suppose. And yeah, like I said, having the garage at home, albeit a single garage, not awfully high. I'm 5'10". I'm not a tall dude. I can put my palm flat on the ceiling. But I worked in there for 18 months with my girlfriend at the time for like the first 12 months or so. We split up, but we were working there. She's a trainer as well, and then continue to work there. And more recently, the garage next door, which is attached to the apartment above mine, the dude moved out, and I took that on as well. It happened to be a little bit larger, taller, a little bit wider. I didn't know that. I just happened to open it up once the garage opened the door one day because there was some shit hanging out the door, and to kick it back in. And my jaw hit the floor when I saw how much larger it was. It's a big 3.5 meter high cavity at the back, just due to the way that the street runs and the way the footings of the building. And I assumed it was the same small size as mine. I was really taken aback. Now I've got two garages side by side, and don't tell the landlord, but I plan on punching a hole through the wall.
He's only joking if the landlord's listening. He's only joking. He's not.
I don't. I think he's about 400 years old, so I don't think he's still interested in what we're talking about. And a few clients are like, are you going to tell them before? I'm like, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So if I ask, they say no, I'm kind of fucked. But if I just do it and then do it properly, get it engineered and all sound and all that sort of stuff, then it's sort of like, oh, well, I did it already.
yeah, that'll be cool. Yeah. And one thing you said there of an opportunity, because don't get me wrong, like we said, a lot of people did struggle during COVID. I think that the first lockdown over here in the UK was about 3 months. I know Australia have had longer lockdowns. That's the first time.
I think Sydney was about the same initially.
Yeah.
We like our first lockdown was roughly about 3 months or so. But yeah, other parts they lingered a lot longer. But yeah.
Because then seeing it as an opportunity, a lot of other coaches that I've spoken to, even though they struggled, a lot of coaches either rebranded and thought, do you know what, actually, I'm going to kind of reinvent myself, or actually make myself look a little bit more professional. One guy who was actually on the podcast just before Christmas, coming straight out of lockdown, similar to yourself, set up his own gym, and that's gone from strength to strength. And one of the things that it's kind of one of those things of, it could be a risk, but you don't know until you give it a go.
100%.
Just because it could be if you're always in that doubt of and I'm sure we'll get onto this about training as well later on. If you always think, I won't be able to do that, or that won't pay off, but actually if you think, well, what happens if I do? What happens if I do actually do it? And then all of a sudden, you're in a lot better situation. So I like to ask that question about, because obviously it has been a strange last couple of years, and I think it's good to see, like what you said, seeing it as an opportunity and trying to get the silver lining after it, because there's got to be light at the end of the tunnel. There's got to be something to look forward to and see that the progression. So obviously I did a little bit of an introduction there. For everyone listening who might not know your background in training, in coaching, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Sure, mate. I can talk about myself all day. It sounds very narcissistic. Just like the filling gaps between clients mightn't have a good chat. Let's talk about me again. Okay, cool. Anyway, no. Well, look, I'm 32. I'll be 33 next week, actually. And I started training when I was. I've been playing sport my whole life, athletics since I was 4, rugby league since I was 6, and a handful of other sports along the way. I first went to the gym when I was 12, so first year of high school. I joined the gym for the first time within 12 months of that, so I was like 13, either the back end of the first year of high school or the beginning of the second, and have been super consistent ever since. So my cousin, who's a few years older than me, 3 years older than me, was essentially a big brother to me, and I was like a little brother to him. We got along really well, and we would go to the gym together. We had sort of friends that was sort of, between our ages and sort of similar. And I was keeping up, if not bettering him, and who was, good in the gym as well. And a lot of other dudes as well. So you can imagine the buy-in for a young teen when it comes to not even bravado or, just sort of like, buy into anything. If you're good at something and a kid's older than you, that like when the kid, you could, like, I was just all in. I was loving it. And I trained hypertrophy focused, for 10, 15, 10, 12 years. With never any intention to compete. My cousin ended up competing. He got on stage. He did some really, really well in some bodybuilding competitions, but it was never my jam. It was never something that I was that interested in. It was more just the training side of things. I was playing rugby league and I was using that, albeit now knowing that training for hypertrophy and training for sport are very different. But this is sort of why I am the way I am as a coach now, seeing inefficiencies in years gone by and looking to better that for other people. But sort of about 10 to 12 years of that, become a PT when did I become PT? Probably early 21 or something like that. I didn't really use it for a number of years, just the way in which my jobs changed at the time. And the job I was working at, I was working on the docks. I don't know what you might call it in the UK. In the US, they call it a longshoreman. We've got a little wharfie here. Anyway, I was working down there for a number of years. They were automating the place, and I had to make a decision whether I was going to try and keep my job or whether I actually wanted to do something with myself and commit myself to the training which I loved and which I was qualified to do. But I took the easy road, which was a decent pay packet and brain dead work. So I made the decision to become further educated in the fitness space, and that was probably 2013. And did some further formal education. A lot of that was, I refer to that as my enlightenment period. That was sort of like that 10 to 12 a year mark of my training experience, and that completely reshaped how I viewed going to the gym. And it really opened, not immediately, but since then, it really opened my eyes to how inefficient my training was, the way in which I was able to facilitate results in spite of inefficiencies. Like I'm genetically, I respond to lifting weights very favorably genetically, always been very athletic, all that sort of stuff. So, you could imagine, I could do just about anything, especially as a young lad, lifting weights wise and training, with no sort of formal education and limited, guidance when it comes to the right methods in which to adopt. I'm getting good results in spite of inefficiencies. It creates a false sense of efficacy for what I'm doing. And it's like, well, what I'm doing is getting results. It must be effective. It's like, well, yes and no. And it's one of those things, not until you you go through that, you see the back and like, oh, okay, I probably could have got there a lot sooner or done things a lot better. So my ethos as a trainer is to be the coach or trainer that I wish that I'd bumped into early on in my lifting career, back when I was a teen. And I'm it's one of those things, right? I'm glad that I didn't bump into someone like me, because like I wouldn't be as passionate as I am now to help people be more efficient with their training, help them become more self-sufficient and better educated, and more confident and more competent in the gym themselves. If I didn't have that period of time in which was so inefficient, sort of paradox there. But that's what I want to try and provide for other people, right? So, so since then I've just been bettering my my skill set, I suppose, working with a very, what's the word? diverse group of everyday folks, old, young, male, female, different goals, things like that. I like the experience of working in a commercial gym, albeit, being strength focused. And a lot of the time people, maybe a lot of the gym staff might, or just because they might look at me and the, big bald headed dude with tattoos and muscles, I'm like, oh, he's a certain type of guy or only wants a certain type of clientele. I'm like, I like being able to help anyone. And the challenge of it is like what I enjoy. But also it's fulfilling, right? It's far more fulfilling to take someone who is not confident, maybe shy, and timid. I had a female client a number of years ago now who I would have to meet outside the gym and walk in with her and, basically hold her hand almost literally until I started, she knew what I was doing, but she was compliant. I wouldn't meet her all the way outside. I'd be like near the door, and then I would, gradually be further.
Like breadcrumbs coming into the gym.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and then I would have a session before hers, immediately before hers was meant to start. Like I would have a session finishing, right before hers was supposed to start, and I would intentionally run it late. So she'd have to come up, this was over time, until she'd had to come up on the gym floor and find me. I'm like, oh, at the time, she knew exactly what I was doing. But at the same time, she became completely like, that's fucking really fulfilling. You know what I mean? That's the why I like doing what I do. And that's a reflection of like the confidence and I've been able to build over the time, that sort of 10 to 12 year period of sort of inefficiency and my enlightenment, and then sort of further progressing myself with my own training. And then obviously then being able to utilize that whole time to better support my clients. And it's where I am now, still doing the same thing.
From because when we were setting up this podcast and sort of the passion and enthusiasm when I mentioned the topics that we were going to go over, and that shows in the content that you put out on social media as well. And I think you've got to have those mistakes to then pass on to other people. So I know for me competing in powerlifting, I now get more excited about my clients competing in powerlifting, because there's some things that I've done in the build up to a competition and on competition day where things have gone wrong. And especially the podcast called Strength Chat, so we'll dive into strength training, but it's one of those things of, oh well, you compete in powerlifting, or you're a big guy, you're gonna slap me on the back and slap me around the head and make me do 1 rep maxes all the time. That's not necessarily the case. Like strength is relative to wherever they want to be. And I tell this story all the time, but one of my claims to fame is, we had a woman come in and she signed up to we do one-to-one, but we also do small group personal training. She signed up, she'd never been to a gym before, and she first signed up to a gym when she was in her 60s. She looked around the gym and she went, I want to flip that tire, because her husband watched.
Shit. I love that.
Her husband used to watch Strongman. So I'm not sure if it's shown around Christmas in Australia, but in the UK, World's Strongest Man always shown at Christmas.
I love watching World's Strongest Man.
And she was just like,
it's always been something. I think even before I really got into lifting too much, especially even like strength stuff, when I was more like hypertrophy focused, it was like, how can you not be in awe of what these dudes are doing? They're
absolutely.
Fucking giants, and then they're just doing like great exercises you'd only ever see in the context of a strongman competition, and only in context typically of a World's Strongest Man type competition, because some of the setups are so enormous and they're so elaborate, but also like the entry point of strength on these things is like absurd. So unless you are 6'6", 160 kilograms and can lift a house, you can't even start these exercises.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And the tire, there's a couple of tires that we've got, and the tire that she flipped was 70 kilos. Now, to a lot of other people listening, and you think of the World's Strongest Man, it's nowhere near, but to that person, she was buzzing and it was awesome. It was as though like, 100%. that was her World's Strongest Man final, and it was awesome. And it's one of those things of, I think sometimes, this is a tangent that we spoke about. I think sometimes when coaches first get started and think about, I'm going to be a strength coach, I'm going to do all this, it's like they just want to focus on the weightlifters and the powerlifters and the CrossFitters, whereas actually, in terms of from a business point of view and being able to work with as many people as you can, the general population, like what you mentioned there, working with as many diverse people as you can still get them to a good level of strength and progress them. Totally. It doesn't have to be a case of, well, I'm just going to be with powerlifters or anything like that. Yeah. But from that, and I know, I train quite a lot of beginners and intermediates. At some point, they can gravitate towards doing a competition, and then that makes it even better because you've taken them from not having any confidence or not being feeling as though they can do anything to then being on a platform which is awesome. Competing.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, for me, like it would say it's poignant you say that in relation to people wanting to like often strength coaches wanting to just work with powerlifters or weightlifters, things like that. I kind of stumbled across even referring to myself as a strength coach, because I still refer to myself as a personal trainer because it's what I do, but as I said, with my previous experience, personal experience training the way I did for building muscle for a long time and what strength was accumulated, like I didn't train for strength like till that 10, 12 plus year period had ended. And I sort of dabbled in a bit of powerlifting from a training method standpoint. Never competed, never sort of looked to, but it was more just sort of trained a certain style for a while and then another for a while and so on, just to experience different things. And I kind of just developed a strength focus as a coaching model, I suppose, coaching methods, just based on, I suppose, what I found myself drawn to when it came to helping people, right? Because obviously as a trainer, your job is to help someone. So people come to you, and it was just an organic development of how I coach someone. So what I found was that people, it was part of my formal education as well. I've worked with a man named Tony Bataji, who's an incredible man, and he taught, like, one of the things he said quite early on in one of the early courses was the greatest thing you have as a coach is your eyes. And then and he taught me how to dissect, how to know what I'm looking at from a movement and technique standpoint, how to dissect it, what it looks like now, look and know what it should be, and what's necessary to join the dots between those two, what's that missing link, basically. And so I got a lot of fulfillment within my personal training, irrespective of what someone's goals were, by helping them understand their own body better, helping them improve their own proprioception as to, what was going on, how to feel load in certain muscles when they were performing certain movements, because it was always my objective to, when I say always, when I first started, you get a bit sort of, you don't want to teach someone too much because they're not going to come back. That's the fear as a coach. You start to question. I don't want to give them all the tricks because they won't come back. But you get a bit more confident with your own ability as a coach, and you realize that you teach them a little bit, you give them a stiff, and then they're like, oh, I'll give me more. And so I suppose I just organically developed a fulfillment attached to support, like helping people become more independent, self-sufficient, confident, competent, all these sort of empowering aspects of training in the gym, knowing full well that's what was lacking for a lot of people. I identified I had the ability to instill that, which was pretty powerful. It's a pretty, fulfilling and powerful feeling to know that you have a power in which to within a skill set to go, here you go, and then through your coaching methods, and then you create, as you said, you like you said with your clientele, you take someone or many people from being not confident and not competent and complete beginners to on a platform. It's like you've given them that in the form of coaching, and that's a power it's a superpower, but it's a power in which you've been able to utilize for good and instill in these people. And that's incredibly fulfilling, right? And like you said, you get more out of greater significance, rather, in my opinion, out of Gen Pop individuals, because you take someone, as you said, you take someone who like this woman you've described, who was 60 odd and never gone to the gym before, and then she ends up flipping a fucking tire and all these sort of things, and then progressing further. And it's like, that is such a significant increase in terms of progress, change, development, the physical, the psychological, so many benefits to that for her, which sort of flows into you. And it's like, fuck, how fulfilling is that? Versus, and this is no slate on working with someone who's experienced, but taking someone who's already experienced and you increase their personal bests from 10 kilos because they haven't been able to nudge it in a long time, and it's massive for them, but it's like, well done, but they don't compare in terms of fulfillment from a coach, from my perspective. Only because that's been, the bulk, because it's very fulfilling. You take someone who recently I got a client, she saw me today, and I fixed her up a while ago, but she's working with the physio for a long time. And the physio, no slate against the physio, but their methods just obviously weren't ticking the right boxes. And she's only 40 odd, and she's having trouble getting up out of a chair without her knees hurting. And for me, it was a matter of, I enjoy working with people that are sort of broken, because it's a challenge, and it's sort of like, to me, it's a matter of, it's just trial and error to work out, all right, well, it hurts when you do this, let's see what we can work with. And then, it's really, the methods aren't challenging for myself, having done it long enough now. And long story short, I was able to take her pretty quickly, from after seeing a physio for 18 months, not really getting any progress, and within a couple of sessions over one session a week over a few weeks, and she gave us some takeaways to do at home and whatever, and her knee issues were no more, because I just taught her how to move better. And as she started to move better and then develop strength through more ideal ways in which to load herself after moving better, it was fixed. You know what I mean? We just continue to strengthen her up. That's fulfilling as shit. That's strength work. You know what I mean? Like you mentioned sort of strength isn't just 1 rep maxes and stuff. Yeah. It's like, I couldn't tell you, because I don't train people for powerlifting meets and things like that. So it's just not relative to most people's goals that I train. But like, I've given people, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've given people 1 rep maxes as tests. Yeah. Like I've let people, if they want to have a crack at something, I'm like, sure, go for one. Context dependent. I'm like, yep, I feel confident that you're not going to hurt yourself doing it. Yeah. And fuck, hands up, I'm not liable. It's one of those things. It's more rare, I think, for people to sort of to shoot for a 1 rep max versus sort of like those other metrics which aren't as identifiable across the board for everyone, and say, like, and name Sally, for instance. Sally can now get up out of a chair without holding onto the sides, with no knee pain. She can now walk up and down the stairs with no issue, no knee pain, not have to hold on the rail. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic, because like, she's only 40 odd, because she's only going to get worse if unaddressed by the time she gets 50 and so on. And it's like,
she'll be buzzing with that. She'll be like, oh my God.
And then instead of like going, her trajectory of sort of how her knees are feeling, for instance, and quality of life and whatnot associated with those sort of issues, instead of the trajectory of that sort of going downward, it's now going upwards, because she's improving where she probably would have been regressing. And the two versions of herself over a period of time just go further and further and further apart. And by the time she's 50, as an example, 10 years in the future, the two versions of herself couldn't be further apart. And so for me, I know that, and that's what allowed me to, why I like doing what I do, working with a diverse group of people, like old and young and things like that, because it's almost selfish, right? I do it for me.
Yeah, makes me feel
so much, I get so much fulfillment out of it. Like, does that make me, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. I'm not even doing it for you. I want you to move better so I can feel good about myself.
A couple of things you mentioned through there as well, which you like educating them, giving them a reason, and like trial and error, like with your client Sally, right? Your knees are hurting walking up and down stairs, and now rather than her just relying on coming to that session with you and not being in pain just in that session, she now knows, all right, okay, so if I do this outside of my sessions, I can walk up downstairs and get outside of the chair. And you mentioned there about measuring different things of strength, which moves, quite nicely onto a couple of questions that I sent over for this podcast. And going back to when you spoke about your background as well, about, when you first started training, you could take your hand at anything, with inefficiencies. You still see progress. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are probably like that, who just go in the gym, all right, I want to do this today. And they get relatively strong, or they see relatively progress, but are inefficient in their technique. And sort of the first question there is, when you're working with your clients, or clients who have had training before, and come in, but the technique's a little bit off, or they have no structure in terms of their training. What's your best practices in terms of, right, how do we start making that a little bit more efficient and trying to change their thought process in terms of, I know you've had progress now, but one thing that you said earlier on was you could have got there a lot faster if we'd addressed these things or worked on these. So what's kind of your approach when you're working with those clients?
Well, good question. I prioritize technique to the nth degree, right? So irrespective of someone's goals, whether it's to gain muscle mass, develop strength, lose body fat, combination of all the above, whatever we're doing, it comes down to the efficiency of your technique, right? So we want a goal, and I explain to clients this way: a goal, whatever physiological adaptation you want to achieve, it takes a long period of time. How long, we don't know definitively, but obviously the bigger the goal, the longer the time it takes. Now, it's an accumulation of a lot of efforts, day in, day out, and so on, over weeks, months, potentially years, depending on what it is. And none of these efforts are grossly like significant from a standpoint of like any more important than any other. They're all very small percentages, but there's a fuck ton of them. So cumulatively, they accumulate to a lot. The analogy I like to use with clients, it's essentially like one brick, building a wall one brick at a time. You place a brick down, you walk away. A day later, you put another brick down. It's going to take a fucking long time before that starts to look like a wall. But if you trust the process, it'll start to look like a wall, and over time it will. So my point there is that when it comes to, say, the efficiency of what we're doing and relative to the technique associated to achieve a goal efficiently, what sort of going off a bit of a tangent in my own head there, but like, to achieve any goal, we want to achieve any goal efficiently, however long a time it takes. If we unpack that long-term goal of a number of years to its smallest point, we sort of, from a zoom in on a microscopic level, we come down to each repetition, right? Because if we think of each session, each training session, each training week, over months and years, or how long it takes, we can go deeper than that. We go to each repetition. So if we prioritize the technique, the efficiency of the technique, within every repetition in which we perform, you will get the most out of yourself, potentially. You're not necessarily going to perform the greatest. You're not going to necessarily perform amazingly every time you train.
Yeah.
But what I described to clients, there are two things in which you can control within a training session. Control the controllables. I'm a bit of a, we'll say, philosopher. That sounds a bit weird, but I like studying that a little bit. And control the controllables, right? So within a training session, you can control two things, that being your the quality of your technique, so how well you execute something, and the sincere, what's the term I'm looking for? The sincere effort associated with that execution. So it's how well you move and how well you perform something, and how hard you try while doing so. how well you sleep, how well hydrated you are, how fed you are, how much you're dealing with stress and related to work or relationships, whatever, are all outside of the gym. You know, concentrate on that outside of the gym. When you're in the gym, when you're training, two variables: how well you can move and your sincere effort to fucking try. If you focus on those two things alone, you will move. And as long as you're guided correctly with some good programming, obviously that matters. But from a technique standpoint, control the controllables. It minimizes what you have to think about. Think about moving as well as you can. Try hard, pretty simple, with that technique. And you'll get the most out of every session you possibly can. Yeah. I explain that to clients in such a way, and like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, good. So when it comes to technique, that's why I go hard in the paint when I'm talking to clients about the importance of just perfecting one repetition. If you're performing, you know what I want to do. You want to know how to squat, even if your goal is to gain muscle and you're utilizing something like a squat or a lunge, or whatever your exercises may be. Just learn how to do the movement one time really well. And then it's just a matter of, you know, seeing your target repetitions at 8. All right, cool. I've got to do 8 of those 1 reps. If you create such a tightly packed data set of what your repetitions, you know, how collected your repetitions are, there's such little variation between repetitions, you can become so autonomous as to how you perform your movement in the gym. You don't have to think about it eventually, right? It's just about applying yourself and making sure that your technique is sound, which once it becomes pretty autonomous, you don't have to try very hard with that. The second part being effort. And you can just put all your attention towards fucking trying hard, which is where you want to be over time. If we look at, you know, top level lifters and things like that, they're focusing on technique, but they have become so autonomous with it. It's just effort focused. It's just making sure, you know, whether their program calls for percentages, which it typically will. If you're a strength athlete and your experience is typically percentage based. So, you know, you're just controlling your percentages, knowing that that's where you want to get to. And it's the same thing that I'll describe to clients who are everyday folks, Gen Pop people, because, you know, there's a reason that there's a method to the madness as to why, you know, elite level lifters have shit the way they do from a programming perspective. We're not trying to compare ourselves as you know, Gen Pop people, or, you know, in relation to clientele, to those more elite lifters, but you can take a lot out of their page, a lot out of their book as to like why they operate the way they do, you know, how they got there, and instituting the same things, because they want to be as efficient as they can be, and they've proven themselves to be so. Hence, they've gotten to that level, and we're doing the same thing. We just don't have as much maybe available to us from a favorable genetic standpoint and or availability to train, and or maybe, you know, that when pushing yourself hard isn't, you know, for you or I, for instance, much more experience than, say, the people that we coach. We can push ourselves a lot harder just based on experience, and maybe it's an internal grit thing. Some people just don't have that, and that's fine. Relative to an individual, them trying as hard as they can is a subjective metric in which I don't say you could have tried harder. Did you try as hard as you can? Yeah, I did. All right, cool. I'll take your word for it. You're only cheating yourself. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just emphasize, you know, what I find when working with clients, if we emphasize just the, you break it down and simplify what they have to focus on when they're doing the squat, just worry about the mechanics of the squat. Don't worry about how many sets and reps and whatever you have to do. So when we first start, we don't actually do a lot of volume, you know, when I'm just like, I want to get you comfortable with the methods in which I teach you, but also it's more, I don't know if psychology based is sort of like the term, but it's more just about a mindset around training, getting people thinking more about the intention behind their actions, then thinking more about their approach to training in general, getting more in their head and focused on, you know, applying themselves as much as they can, knowing full well, as I said, like it's the effort at the end of the day. Once, you know, technique is developed further and further, it's that effort which we want to bring up over time. and which is why, you know, any program typically starts at a relatively low percentage or moderate and then to the peak, right? So it sort of scales up the effort, and then because hopefully by then technique is more more taken care of, is more autonomous, and so you can, like, that's, you know, you don't have to think about it as much, and effort can be sort of more prioritized.
It's good when you, especially because I think always people will always look to elite level powerlifters, or like, you know, the world's strongest man that we mentioned earlier, and we're like, you know, Brian Shaw didn't just come out at 2 meters tall. Like, he hasn't always been like that. But it's a case of, you know, starting from that one brick, right? Okay, we're working our way up, and it's just because you know, people who are at the elite level, you know, sometimes I think people think it's an extreme example, but they've had to start somewhere. They've had to walk into a gym for the first time somewhere, and it's just that thing of, even though they're lifting, you know, crazy weights, sometimes they've got the technique, and they put that effort in when it needs to be. And, you know, I think dialing back that effort is a different sort of subject in terms of, you know, programming and everything. But if you've got a coach, you can work with that. And the main thing, as you were using that as an example, is you mentioned two things there. That wasn't just weight on the bar. That wasn't just, going this week, put this weight on the bar, going this week and this put weight on the bar. It's the thing of what can you control? Because sometimes when you might go in the gym, you might be like, oh, I'm knackered, I've worked a 12-hour shift, I can't put weight on or anything like that. So where's what other things are you trying to measure when we're looking at strength, when we're looking at that effort and technique? But also, what about clients? It's a little bit like what you mentioned there about if someone's slightly under on effort because they're a little bit unsure. Is it a case of, right, now we need to work on technique? And then if it's a case of people are maybe putting too much effort in and wanting to put loads of weight on the bar, how do you sort of maybe hold them back a little bit, if those two questions kind of make sense?
I suppose when it comes to everyone, like my goal as a coach, as a trainer, is to ensure that first and foremost they're enjoying themselves. Like, because I want to make sure that like, my job is to ensure that their time with me is about them and that they're enjoying themselves. And their time in the gym, their experience in the gym is that of an enjoyable one, and that it always should be. And I want to instill in them as much confidence and competency and self-sufficiency that they can take all that good stuff, and understand that training should be an enjoyable experience as they're getting results, and that failing or going close to failure, so when things start to break down, it's kind of what we want. Often we're looking for that, not all the time, but obviously, you know, we want to challenge yourself, so that's going to happen, and accepting that is sort of like a good thing, and knowing, you know, teaching them self-sufficiency from a technique standpoint, so they can identify how a movement will break down before it does, so they can mitigate it before it does, and then they can feel for it and they can stop it and get better. That's first and foremost, to make sure they enjoy it. If someone's a little bit, a little bit gung-ho when it comes to the intensity, and they want to go a little bit harder than they want to, it comes down to technique. To me, it's like, I can't emphasize that point enough. Like, if they've earned the right to attack, if they want to go ahead, like, for me, I don't, like I said, then this sort of attached to the enjoyment standpoint. I will always have a degree of fluidity as to how I train someone, based on the fact that I want them to enjoy it. If they want to do something, they want to come in, they want to listen fucking heavy shit, and I'm like, okay, that's you today. You know what I mean? And it's like, all right, cool. And prioritize technique as always. That's going to be the litmus test as to whether they've earned the right on that day to have a crack or whatever. And if they're feeling good, all right, good. They know, and I take it subjectively, case by case. Typically, obviously, want someone to build towards something, but at the same time, if someone's feeling shit hot and they want to have a nudge, and then by all means do so. On the flip side of that, if they're not, again, I always get someone to come in. How's your day? How you doing? That's part of the personal experience and the service provided within what we're doing. Otherwise, like, I think if we're too set in our ways in regards to following numbers and things like that, we lose sight of why someone is seeing us in the first place, because we're not dealing with athletes at the end of the day. We're dealing with everyday folks that want to achieve, like you said, your 6-year-old client who wants to achieve, never been in the gym before, wants to achieve that. It's like, if she comes in and she goes, one day she wants to flip a tire, fucking fantastic. Another day she's like, I hurt my knee doing something innocuous. All right, cool. We'll do some upper body and we'll take your mind off your shit knee for the day. You know what I mean? So there's got to be an ebb and flow in terms of how you go about things. I forgot your first question. What was the first part of that question, though, in relation to
just measuring the different bits of strength? Because I know sometimes a lot of people just think squat, bench, and deadlift. That's all we're going to focus on. Whereas for some people, not everyone people might not bench. They might do an overhead press or whatever it may be. Yep. Do you have sort of your own bank of exercises that you measure strength with, or a little bit like when you mentioned there, which is something we'll touch on again, because I was thinking about it as you were chatting about it. Do you vary that depending on the client? Well, because like what we said at the start, strength is relevant or relative to that
it's
person.
So fluid. It's so fluid. Yeah, 100%. And that's basically, that's a good point. And it's basically where I am with most people. And it's like with myself, right? I get questions from time to time. I'll put a question box on Instagram or something like that. And people are like, oh, where do you see your squat might go to, or things like that? And I'm like, well, I never have put an upper limit on what I feel I can do. Obviously there's a genetic, ceiling, but at the same time, it's like, there's no value in pointing to something and be like, that's what I want to get to, or that's where I think it might be, or anything like that. My goal, it still is, always has been, and this is sort of what I instill in clients, is that just one foot in front of the other. Wherever you start now is, you said you're sort of in relation to your Brian Shaw as an example and things like that. It's like they just started fucking way back there, and and obviously genetically blessed when it comes to those sort of sports, but that's why those people end up where they are, because they have this strong genetic predisposition to certain physiological adaptations. Usain Bolt is world's fastest man, not just because he was had the great coaches. He defies convention when it comes to the physique of a sprinter. You know what I mean? It's sort of genetically blessed in that regard, plus all the right balance of nature and nurture. But in relation to goals and sort of metrics I might use with clients, it's nothing specific when it comes to exercises. You're squatting, you're deadlifting, and things like that. Just general exercises. Whatever exercises I feel that, and they're all the basics. That I would prescribe to clients, because they don't have any set. They want to get stronger, right? Yeah. What does that mean? They don't really know. They want to feel stronger. They want to feel more confident, more robust, more reliable. They can do shit. Things aren't difficult. All these sort of like real world examples of what strength means to people. And we use, set exercises which to facilitate that result. And which is why, another reason why I suppose I gravitated towards strength coaching within sort of the wider scope of personal training, and is how identifiable is the word, but how measurable strength is in relation to any goal. You want to gain more muscle, drop body fat, things like that. Developing strength on a regular basis at progressive overload is quite easily measurable. And if someone has purely aesthetic goals, I'll still get them to strength train, because chasing an aesthetic goal is going to be more about what they put in their mouth or don't put in their mouth. But that's so just so ambiguous and fluid, and so many variables there. But what is measurable is whether you did more reps or more weight than you did last week, and every week week that preceded it, and so on, right? And that's like, oh, I am making progress. Just mind fucking people, reworking their focus as to what it is they prioritize relative to the goals they want to achieve. And so they want to improve strength. Okay, good. Well, that's easy because we got to lift more weight or do more reps. It's an easy sell. If someone wants to get more muscle, okay, the way in which we use the way in which we determine whether you're gaining more muscle. Obviously, it's just a matter of managing sort of slight variations in programming. Is that we're lifting a little bit more weight, or doing a few more reps, or pushing a little bit closer to fatigue, and a few less reps in the tank than we did last week, and so on and so forth. And that's a reflection of you gaining more muscle, because the way in which the programming, careers you down that path.
It is that,
but yeah,
the measure of it there, the last little bit that you said there of, mind fucking people into thinking we're doing this. It is that thing of, I think strength, and I don't know whether this is a tangent or not, but the strength side of things, ultimately, to get stronger, you need to measure if you're lifting heavier, if you're getting better at the exercises, or doing more reps of the push-ups.
By definition, right? That's what I say to clients. By definition, to get stronger, you need to lift a heavier load.
Absolutely. But then thinking about that'll have a knock-on effect on either feeling more confidence, because if they've lifted X amount of weight more this week, they'll walk out the gym 10 feet tall and be like, oh, I'm feeling good. And then that gives them, going back to what you mentioned about the philosophical side of things, that gives them more strength to deal with other things. And however many things you mentioned there, you started off with strength, but then that can make them more confident can make them more robust. And that's the thing. And that's why I kind of wanted to, I know you said that we mentioned there about control the controllables, technique, and how much effort you put in, that what you can do in the session, but then that is going to have a knock-on effect on loads of other things outside of that. And one thing I wanted to touch on in terms of the fluidity of sessions, because the majority of people that yourself and I know who I work with aren't professional athletes. They're not elite level powerlifters or strongmen or anything like that. They're not going to have a good day every day. Some day they want to come in and, like what you mentioned, they want to lift really heavy stuff, or some days they just want to maybe have a chat and do some bicep curls.
100%.
Definitely.
I have had so many clients that sorry to cut you off. I had so many clients that have come in, and even now, like, I could get through like 4 sets within a session of an hour, and they're finished and they're like, that was such a great workout. I'm like I know from experience, but to me, it just reaffirms the fact that they're paying me for a service. I want to make sure that the service that I provide is one, what they're paying for, but obviously knowing what it is they're paying for, whether they know it or not, whether they know that's what they're paying for, they're feeling fulfilled, they're getting that enjoyment out of our time. But that's sort of just, you spend enough time with people, you generally want to help people, you read people and you're like, okay, this is what's happening today. They've had a shit day, or they've, their partners, left them, or whatever the situation may be. And then, you're just a person that is showing care and genuine sort of support for them while they're lifting some stuff. They're getting a physical output from an energy perspective. They're sort of, blowing the cobwebs out, and they're able to unload shit. And for me, I'm like, you can unload on me all you want. I'm like, to me, I find that, the fact that someone feels comfortable enough to say and talk about shit in which they mightn't feel comfortable talking to other people about, and then that they can fight in myself or you and other trainers that with their own clients. I'm like, to me, that's pretty powerful. I like that. I like the fact that I can be someone that they can talk to about that. We lift some weights along the way. It's not difficult. I just got to listen, right?
Then they can walk out a little bit lighter than, because like what you said. And when I first started coaching, there was a guy called Chris Kershaw who was kind of my mentor, if you like, when I first started, and he actually said the exact same thing of you. People are paying you to come to see you for an hour. They're taking an hour out of their day to come and train, and it's kind of sometimes they might just want to they've had a not very good day. and they just want to unload. But then that way, that then sets them up for a better rest of the day or rest of the week, because now they're out there. Because I think people have got to be able to do that, or else, you know, they just, you know, have it pent up, and then, you know, they're not going to be able to lift heavier next week. One thing on that is, you know, sometimes it is a case of not having a very good day, or wanting to lift heavy. But how do you sort of distinguish between just ego lifting and just wanting to put weight on the bar, compared to, right, okay, actually we're going to put our efforts of not having a very good day into lifting? Does that kind of make sense? How do you, so for people who are coming in who just want to show off and be like, yeah, I'm actually really, I'm gonna lift as much as I can in the gym, compared to, right, controlling it in terms of, yeah, we're going to put our efforts into lifting heavy, but within a controlled environment?
Well, fortunately, where I am now, I'm just training people at home, so it's just a very one-on-one, very private dynamic. So no one's really, I'm in complete control. But even then, I suppose it comes down to, I think a lot of it comes down to the ownership you have as the coach, as the dude wearing the pants. And it's like, this is my house. You do as I say. And, you know, if I tell you that we're lifting this, you know, like whether, you know, lifting a certain weight and it's not as much as you want it to be, that's what we're doing. You know what I mean? And but it's like it's a gauge, you know, day to day, person to person, things like that. And again, coming back to technique, it's based on technique, right? If someone for whatever reason, you get to know your clients very personally, and you kind of know when someone's feeling off or they're feeling good or whatever the case may be. And if again, technique is always prioritized. So if we're doing a deadlift, for instance, as the first exercise, we'll go through a very typical sort of load progression as a warm up. I'm asking a million questions, you know, in relation to how things feel and how the day was, all these sort of things, getting a gauge for how performance may be on the day. And then an immediate response in regards to how the load feels. Does that 60 kilos feel like 60, or does it feel like 90, or does it feel like 40? You know, these sort of things. And then as it progresses, I'm like, all right, cool. And because at the same time, similar to myself within my own training, if I like to go off script, you know, if someone is fit, because again, as you mentioned just before, we're dealing with real people in the real world, and sometimes they're feeling fucking shitty and average and had a terrible day or whatever, and other times they're feeling shit hot. So I like to take advantage, and this is just for myself as well, I like to take advantage of days in which I'm feeling shit hot, and then make sure I pump the brakes so I don't hurt myself, and I don't set the bar of expectation unnecessarily and unachievably high on those days I'm not feeling great. And same with my clients, because most training days are going to be somewhere in the middle, following the program in which we've set. But I think there always needs to be, a degree of fluidity available, and knowing when and by how much we allow that to influence the program. Because again, it's at the end of the day, it's there's so many variables associated with the physical adaptation which we're trying to facilitate, that if we don't have a degree of fluidity there and malleability with our processes, it places unnecessary restriction on ourselves. So that day in which you were feeling shit hot and you probably could have given it a nudge a little bit, as you mentioned very, very wisely, imagine what that would have done for someone, knowing full well they weren't supposed to do that. And they give it a nudge and they lift a bit more, not necessarily a PB or anything like that, but they good more than they expected. Happy days. And then the next week, they're back to sort of, a bit more of a normal session. And they know that, they develop, they understand the methods before we even get there. It's a lot of this shit is what I talk about with clients early on, while we're not even worried about reps and sets in the first sort of initial phases of our training. It's just sort of emphasizing technique, removing that as a thought process about how many reps and sets you're doing. I'm just throwing arbitrary numbers at them. Oh, we'll do half a dozen. Yeah, go for 6 of those. And just focus on your technique. It really removes, and I say it in such a flippant way, so they don't think about it. They don't focus on it. And how many went on? Oh, we'll do 3 sets or something, 4 sets maybe. And then the next exercise. And so all they're focused on is the technique. how many sets and reps we did. Because again, at the start, it's relatively arbitrary. It's just about getting them comfortable with what to focus on, that being the technique. Once they feel more comfortable, more confident, all those good things, I feel more confident and with themselves, and understanding their sort of, if I think that they're more confident, then I'll start to give them something which is a bit more structured. And because from there, again, it's about just teaching them, again, for what should be prioritized. That being technique. The sets and reps, yes, obviously are important, but they play second fiddle to your technique, because if you've got the best program in the world from a numbers perspective, but your technique is dog shit, you can assume I'll give you one guess what your results will be. You know what I mean?
And as well, I think we've been able to manage, because I kind of say this all the time. Unless you are an elite level powerlifter, strongman, training is someone's hobby. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you said, which I try and instill in the clients that I work with, and how I put content out there as well. Like this, it's a chat. It's got to be fun. We're talking about things that we enjoy training about, and yes, you can have, because there's loads of information out there, and we've touched on it throughout this chat, of guided programming, principles of progressive overload, and all those sorts of things. Whereas if you don't enjoy it, you aren't going to go back next week and be like, right, I'm going to give this a go again, and keep going back. One of the things that you said, going back right to the start, right? You start off on one brick, and then you go away, and then come back. It's going to take that time, and if you're not enjoying it, you'll just get halfway to building a wall and just go, nah, this is for me. I'm gonna find something else. Which I think people have to remember, and having that flexibility is good. I like to think of it as, I sometimes always think deep down I'm like a secret anarchist, but sort of like controlled chaos, of terms of, there's loads of stuff going on. You've just got to manage it and adjust it as you can, with all those principles that we know of programming in the background. Quite a lot of topics and tangents thrown in there. But one of the last questions, one of the last questions that I like to ask is, from everything that we've chatted about there, for everyone listening who might be people wanting to get involved in training, or coaches listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Oh, very broad. Well, I suppose for me, in relation to people training in the gym, is to get yourself a coach. That's something I never did. As I said, that my ethos as a trainer, as a coach, is to be the trainer, the coach that I wish that I'd bumped into years ago. And that's why I am passionate about health and fitness and getting people stronger. And with social media the way it is now, it's just the internet, and with social media being the thing, it wasn't when I started training. 2002 was when I started training, and there's so much, even within your local area, the gym in which you train at, and obviously a little bit wider, you can find, I like face-to-face training. I'm all about online, and I'm trying to I'm dipping my toe in that pool as well at the moment. But I love the face-to-face training. I don't think I'd ever want to get rid of that completely, but I enjoy it too much. But find yourself a coach. Find yourself someone that you can work with, someone that can teach you how to do shit properly, and instill in you confidence, competency, self-sufficiency, all those attributes that you require in order to be a completely self-sufficient and autonomous version of yourself in the gym. Because this is what I say to clients, even if you are training with me exclusively 5 days a week, which no one does, but the only times you train are with me, I can't lift the shit for you. I can't. Also, all I can do is guide you, tell you what to do, instruct you, instill in you, good habits and whatnot, but you have to do the work. when the going gets tough, what are you going to do? And what allows someone, as you would know, as be an experienced individual, I mean, you train people to try to jump into a competition and stuff. Is that it's that grit, it's that internal drive, it's that sort of that untangible element of training, which only develops through experience and confidence. And even if someone is training with you exclusively and they're not training outside of that, you need to develop that within that person so they can get the most out of their session, say with you. But most people aren't doing that. Most people only see you once a week, maybe a couple of times a week or something like that. And so hopefully they're doing the bulk of their training, not with you. If you're an online coach, they're not seeing you at all. And so you need to find a way in which to develop, I suppose this almost goes into what to do as a coach, right? You need to develop a smooth transition there. You need to develop a skill set from a coaching standpoint to provide, support, confidence boosting, methods, whatever you develop as a coach, in order to, and you're only going to get that by sheer fucking experience, knowing what works, what doesn't, what's the receptive nature of, your methods, which I think I'm very biased towards. If you are going to work online as a coach, it's absolutely fine, but you need to have experience face-to-face first, so you know what it's like dealing with people. Because if you generally want to help and support people, not having direct face-to-face experience, as we discussed at length in terms of like the variability of how someone may perform, even ourselves on a day-to-day basis, based on a myriad of variables. You're only going to know that from a genuine standpoint when someone is fucking standing in front of you and you can talk to them and they say, yeah, I feel okay, I feel good. And they're fucking lying. And because they don't want to feel like they're going to unload, and you just pick at them and unpack, and then they open up and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then you create a relationship. So you get to know people, that person specifically, but you get to know people. And as a coach, just developing methods in which, again, from it, like I'm big on reverse, I'm a bit of a tangent here, but I'm big on reverse engineering things, I suppose. Yeah. What is the objective that we're trying to achieve? Okay, how do we get there? Working backwards, how do we get there? Rather than being, oh, here I am now, I want to achieve that. Oh, what's the next step I need to take? It's like, all right, well, I want to achieve X. All right, I'm now fucking all the way back here. All right, what is the step before X? And then step before that, and so on. And so when it comes to, as a coach, what I'm trying to deliver, like a sort of we touched on before, what I want to try and deliver is an enjoyable experience. Make sure that people enjoy it. I'm like, all right, cool. That's sort of a foundation and a fundamental sort of principle and focus for me. What's one step back from there, or attached to that, open up Pandora's box there. But from a coaching perspective, it's sort of, all right, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to provide for your clients? You obviously want to achieve their goals, but you want to get them to becoming self-sufficient, knowing full well that they're going to do bulk of their training without you there. How do you do that? What are the methods in which you develop to help support and facilitate achieving that objective? You're only going to achieve that through, trial and error, a lot of experience. That's something that, people ask me all the time. Almost any goal, just got to throw some shit against the wall, see what sticks. Now, experience tells you where to throw that shit on said wall. But in saying that, it's still like, look, and I'm honest with clients, and there's always a degree of almost faith or like their trust when there's that transparency and honesty. It's like, look, if they're injured or something, it might be like, oh, look, I really don't know, but I think it might be this. Let's try a certain protocol, see if it works. If it does, success. If it doesn't, we've just checked one thing off the list that we know doesn't work. So we're one step closer to finding the solution.
I think that's a good way, a good point to finish on, because it's one of those things of anything worth achieving, whether you're a coach listening, to get experience and to be that experienced coach that has all these stories and has some of the answers, takes time to get strong, it takes time. You don't just walk into the gym.
Tried more shit, right?
Yeah.
You've just thrown more shit against more walls, and you've seen what's stuck, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, yeah, that's a perfect point, right? It's sort of, it's, what's that, knock down 7 times, get up 8 sort of like cliche. But it's exactly right. You've just been, you used the Brian Shaw example before, and it's sort of like, these people aren't, yes, they're genetically blessed and but they're just fucking people at the end of the day. And say from a coaching, so from let's say an athlete or a trainee versus or like an athlete or sort of a coach rather, it's just someone that who has been around longer, maybe tried more things, been more not necessarily experimental, but being more open to trying things and not being scared to fail, knowing knowing full well that they're being, depending on what we're in context we're talking about being safe in those processes, and guided through formal education and whatnot, and learning from past sort of failures, I suppose, and then wondering, all right, unpacking those things. So working into like, oh, that didn't work. I wonder why that didn't work. I'll try that with this person. Oh, okay. Now I know why that didn't work with so-and-so 2 years ago, because I didn't think to try this. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. I can't remember. I can't pull out specific instances, but I know in the past, and I think a lot of that just comes from just further development as a coach, which, of a bit of a tangent there. As I mentioned, I think you're only going to learn these skills to better provide, a top tier service to clients, say from a distance, online, or at least just even in general, because most of the clients' training isn't going to be with you. It's going to be by themselves, and you're only going to develop a better sense of how to coach people and how to support people when you're there or when you're not there, by spending more time boots on the ground with people face to face. So then you almost earned the right, I believe, to then provide an equivalent support and service almost from a distance, right? But you need to know how to do it first face to face, which then remove yourself from that interaction, and that you're dealing with someone on the other end of that screen, and not just numbers or not just like an avatar. What questions to ask, how to unpack, how are you feeling? Are you really feeling that way? I
think that's sometimes, especially, I know we spoke about COVID at the start of the chat, but I think that's where sometimes people think, oh, well, I'll just do online. Whereas actually as a coach, and this, nothing to do with strength training or anything like that, we're in the business of working with people. So you've got to understand 100%. how to speak to them and build relationships. I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't always work. I've had clients who they've not liked me and I've not liked them. Okay, you need to find somebody that you can work with, and that's fine.
I totally
agree. Thanks a lot, Sean, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed.
I appreciate the invite. I had a great time.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. But for everyone listening who might have questions about what we've chatted about, want to see your content out there, or get in touch with you, where can people find you or reach out to you?
I am on Instagram at Apex Strength Society, and if you're interested in online coaching, online training, I have Apex Strength School, which is a number of phases available. So I have a 6-week training course, phase 1 and phase 2, and basically just covering a lot of what I just described within the podcast, in terms of what I want to provide to people, what I was making recommendations for other coaches to do, that being, is help skill up everyday folks into becoming more confident, more competent, and self-sufficient within the gym. Because at the end of the day, most people's, as I said, most people's training are going to be by themselves, maybe with a training partner, but not under the direct eyes of an experienced coach. So what I provide within the Strength School is extensive educational content in the form of very detailed tutorial videos, as well as additional educational videos within that. A very sound program in which for people to follow, all delivered on a very nice platform. Yeah, so 6-week training course for phase 1. Phase 2 is a 6-week course. I've got phase 1 about to be updated with a mobility component, completely free to those who have already purchased it. The price will stay the same. And phase 3 coming out within the next couple of months. So yeah, that's my plug. Thank you very much for letting me get that out there.
Awesome. For everyone listening, if you haven't seen the content that Sean puts out there, all the topics that we've spoken about, we've not just mentioned about putting more weight on the bar, controlling the controllables. 100% look at what Sean's putting out there, because if you just wanted to get involved in strength training, or you've been training a while and struggling to get stronger, controlling those controllables will help that. Looking at technique, putting that effort in, and it will help. So thanks a lot, Sean, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.